Hi, I'm Jane McCallion.
And I'm Adam Shepherd.
And you're listening to the ITPro Podcast, where today we're talking about sports. Thankfully for any England fans who may be listening, though, we're not talking about football or the Euros. Instead, we're talking about the world's second most popular sport, with an estimated 2.5 billion fans across the globe.
Cricket may have started in Britain, but in Australia it's somewhere between a national pastime and a religion. Like most sports, it's also being transformed by technology. And this week we're joined by Michael Osborne, General Manager of Technology at Cricket Australia, to discuss the impact that emerging technologies are having on the sport and how they may help fuel its growth and development. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So could you tell us a little bit about Cricket Australia and your role within the organisation?
Cricket Australia is the national governing body of the sport in Australia. And as the GM of technology, I have the privilege of leading our technology function that supports all levels of the game in the country, from the 8-year-old picking up the bat for the first time through the state competitions, our professional Big Bash League, and ultimately to the men and women representing the country internationally. So it's a great opportunity and a really interesting place for tech to play across all those different levels of the sport in the country.
So what role does digital technology play in Australian cricket?
Well, as you can imagine, it's really everywhere now. So I think about it really in three lenses. There's the lens of the organizations themselves and the workforce that works for cricket in Australia. How do we make that workforce as efficient, as effective as possible, whether they're helping develop talent, out in the community, helping build the game at the participation level and so on. That's a key customer of technology. Then, of course, there's our fans. And how do we bring our fans closer to the game, allow them to engage with it however they choose. And finally, and equally importantly, are the participants and volunteers who pick up the bat every weekend and play through the summer, and the volunteers who give up their time to make all that happen. So we really try to deliver solutions to support all three of those customer groups. A huge shout out and a thanks to HCL and them bringing this idea to the table and their capability to reach around the world to make this a reality. So we're just thrilled that they're helping us do this. And of course, Microsoft is involved, is helping provide the platforms for folks to develop on, which is also fantastic. I hope this is an awesome start this year, and we find some great ideas we can bring to life, and that it's something that grows over the years.
Yeah, because I think for many people, cricket has quite for want of a better word, quite an old-fashioned kind of vibe. It seems very, very genteel and very kind of almost kind of like it hasn't changed that much since, the 18th century. You half expect players to still have great big handlebar moustaches underneath their helmets. But as you say, it is being transformed by technology like every sport. So kind of what are some of the key tools that are helping to kind of enable that transformation for you?
Well, maybe I'll answer that from a community perspective. Over the summer, there's over 700,000 registered players in the country who are competing, at every level, from the under 8s all the way through to the seniors. This day and age, we have about 60% of those games are now live scored on a mobile app. So the old days, the big paper book, sitting by the sideline, keeping track of all the statistics. For 60% of those games, which is thousands that happen every weekend, it's live scored, streamed across to our My Cricket app, where then parents, brothers, friends, siblings can follow in real time how the scores are coming together. They can track their friends. So we've really tried to add that extra experience to the really physical experience of being out on the field, that ability for people to come together, follow matches, and increasingly we're live streaming all of those matches.
Oh,
So
wow.
that really ability to get the community engaged when they're not physically present, especially in a game that can take quite a while. That ability to follow it along as you're living your life.
So you've spoken obviously about the kind of community side of things. For teams, they must surely be making use of digital technology as well. Pretty much in every sport, you see greater and greater use of sort of data analytics and cloud and that kind of thing. What is it that teams are up to?
Well, I won't go into too many specifics in some of the magic sauce that works in the high. But suffice to say, the ability now to get a much deeper insights based on the data around athletes is immense. And so the platforms that we now run to understand the health of athletes, to understand their chance of injury, to help tailor their training programs, it's really about putting much more information in the hands of the coaches, the selectors, the medical staff, so they can tailor the program to each player as precisely as they possibly can. And it's just a remarkable amount of data that is now available through the wearables, through the tracking systems to understand and to help those athletes be the best they can be. And I maybe won't go too much farther into the sauce there, talking on a UK podcast.
If you're worried about the Scotland cricket team, honestly, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Has the uptake of that within the teams, by people who, if you are a medic or perhaps even a coach, especially if you are of a slightly kind of more traditional older generation, has uptake been enthusiastic, or has there been any resistance at all? And or has that changed over time?
I think it's fair to say it's changing over time, but what is a consistent theme for all of those people is they're trying to get the best out of the athletes. And this is just another tool in their arsenal, or another set of tools that let them get the best and help the athletes be their best. So I think there's an embracing and an ever increasing embracing, both at like the staff level, as well as the athletes themselves, who really want to understand how they're performing, how they can do better, etc. So it is broadly being embraced. We even see and are thinking through plans of how do we provide these capabilities into the broader community. There's such a desire for individuals to use the capabilities and data that's available now to help with their own performance. How can we sort of democratize the kinds of technologies we've got at the elite level, so that kids playing on the weekend can access some similar capabilities to tune and potentially gamify their own experience playing the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the key examples for whenever you're talking about sports data is of course Moneyball, where data was used to radically improve the performance of a baseball team. But cricket has kind of been very heavily stat focused and stat based for years and years and years. Basically, for the entire modern history of the game, cricket has been heavily stat driven. So I can imagine that kind of data science and data analytics was something that came very naturally to both teams and, as you say, players and community members.
Yeah, I think it is. And, we've had a few members of our high performance staff who are pretty forward thinking and have really driven, the disciplines and the practices that's required to get really good data. And so we're lucky we've got a phenomenal data set for elite athletes as they come through the pathway now. But it does take that leadership, from the high performance system itself, to make sure we get the data in a way it can be used, analyzed, and ultimately producing insights for our coaches and for our athletes.
I mean, as the GM of technology for Cricket Australia, obviously This must be quite an interesting role in some ways. You are looking after a sport and you're presumably still doing a lot of the kind of traditional technology type stuff while also lumping on this data analytics piece that is driving forward the sport and driving forward Australian technology. How do you, I guess, kind of balance that a bit? And what does your background kind of bring to all this?
Well, I think that's not a challenge unique to sport. I think most CIOs or GMs of technology around the world are trying to find that balance. We've got to keep the networks running. We've got to keep the PCs up and safe. The data centers have to keep running, but equally we need to find that second gear to focus on the digital transformation, the strategies that are going to move our companies forward. My professional career has largely been in consulting, and it's the same challenge we have there, just a slightly different, and in some cases a more fun subject matter that we're trying. But it is about finding that balance, and technology ultimately is a service function, and we're here to serve the fans and participants of cricket, but equally the staff. So we've got to find that balance that makes sure that the coders, the high performance who code all the games for high performance, that they've got the right machines to make that work. But equally that we've then got the right data governance practices in place that folks can count on the data that they will then be using to find insights into how the team's performing and so on and so forth. So I think it's a common juggling act for all sort of technologists in companies to find that right balance of keeping things running and fast and finding the bandwidth and resourcing to push forward with new ideas.
So, Mike, let's talk about the Tech Jam competition. Now, this is something that you announced in partnership with technology company HCL. It's the first, correct me if I'm wrong, in a new annual competition that you're going to be running every year. What's the aim of this initiative?
We're really excited about the Tech Jam. And where it's come from, we actually last year ran a data jam, really focused on analyzing our high performance data. But we're really excited with working with HCL, who's our digital tech partner, to try to find amazing ideas in a number of different streams that we can bring to our fans and participants. We know there's so many passionate people out there who love the game, have really great technical skills, and we just know that if we can engage that community, they can find solutions that we would never even think of. So if we can find a nugget in any one of our challenge tracks, whether it's around our high performance data and tips that will help us on the field, whether it's in the fan engagement space, and a really clever idea that can make the experience of following along in the local pub with our CA Live app as a second screen, if there's a clever idea to engage that person in the game, or a really clever way of making something easier for a volunteer. As I'm sure has happened in the UK, COVID has just added another layer of things volunteers have to deal with to help their communities get these matches off. So is there something that can make life easier, an easy way to have people check into a match or whatever it would be that's going to help move the game forward. So we just think by tapping HCL's huge network and all these sort of passionate cricket lovers around the world who've got great technical skills, if they can come on to this challenge, I'm sure we're going to uncover some nuggets that together with HCL we can bring to life.
And how long is it going on for, Tech Jam?
So it's running over our winter, so July and August, with the idea of before the season starts, we can do the voting get ourselves down to the winning solutions before the English team arrives here and we start cricket with the Ashes.
So how many entries are you expecting for this competition?
I'm hoping we're going to have several thousand. When you look at the success HCL has had with some of its other tech jams or hackathons, they've been able to bring a large number of candidates from around the world. So we're pretty optimistic that the number of submissions and teams will be in the thousands. And we'll be able to vet that down to some really good ideas in the final group.
So are there any areas that you expect to be particularly popular in terms of projects and ideas centered around particular topics, say?
Sure. As I mentioned, there's a number of challenge tracks where we're encouraging people to think about. One of those is high performance, and it's really around the rich data that we have available for 100 years of Test cricket. So there's going to be clearly, I think, a lot of interest in sort of tearing into that data set and seeing what kind of patterns, trends can be developed. I think that'll be a favorite. I do also think the fan engagement track, what clever ideas, whether it's at match, at home, at a pub, clever ways can we use digital to better connect fans to that experience. I think that's going to be quite popular as well. But we've also said that there's a sort of a free-for-all track. I'm not sure it quite fit into one of the categories we've come up with. Love to hear it, love for it to come in, and I'm hoping we get some really clever ideas that we never would have thought of.
Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting track, I suspect.
The anarchy track.
Are there any ideas that you'd like to lift from other sports in terms of using digital technology to enhance both the way the sport is played and the way that fans engage with the sport? Because obviously there's been a lot of development, in areas like soccer, in areas like the NFL in the US or the NBA, indeed. It's a sector which has seen a lot of innovation over the last couple of years. Is there any of that that's inspired you and that you'd like to replicate for Australian cricket?
Yeah, one that jumps to mind is the NBA, and we've had the opportunity to connect with them a couple of times as well. But the NBA does such a good job of engaging the youth demographic. If you can believe it, the NBA itself is one of the most popular sports in Australia from a fandom perspective, particularly amongst that youth demographic. And none of those kids, or very few of them, will ever get to go and see a live NBA game. And in fact, they're going to have to follow these games at inconvenient times of the day and night. And yet they're able to reach them, to connect with them. They're able to amplify their player brands, provide solutions into markets that really get people engaged. So a lot of what what the NBA is doing from a direct-to-consumer perspective is really interesting to us. And of course, some of the European soccer clubs have built really large audiences and focus a lot on how they bring those fans who won't be able to come to the stadiums ever. And it's similar for us. We have about 20 million fans during the summer that will come to our web properties, unique. And of course, maybe about 6 or 7 million of those are Australians, but the rest is international viewers. So how do we deliver them experiences, knowing that the chances of them physically showing up at the match are going to be quite few. So there's many good case studies in sport of different sports doing amazing things, and we try to observe and grab what ideas we can from some of those other sporting codes.
So, Michael, you said that this you're hoping will be an annual competition. Are hackathons in bringing in that kind of community collaboration on things like data and just ideas for how tech can be used in sport the future of cricket and possibly just sports in general?
I think so. I think, in a way, it's our past and our future. The way cricket and any sport operates is on the passion of our fans, and the people who engage with the sport. And we talked earlier about our live scoring solution. It's that passion of those people who've been scoring on the book for 60 years that make the game work. And what we've got to do is figure out a way to build that community for the future. And I really do think that's around data, it's around technology. So the more we can engage our community, the more wonderful ideas, amazing ways to experience cricket that we're going to develop. Because it's ultimately not our game; it is our fans' game. It's just something we're acting as custodians of for the short period of time that we work for the company. So the more we can have our fans, and people who are passionate about cricket be part of the future evolution, it's only going to be healthier for the game.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. But thank you once again to Michael Osborne, General Manager of Technology at Cricket Australia, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You can find links to all of the topics we've spoken about today in the show notes and even more on our website, itpro.co.uk.
You can also follow us on Twitter, where we are at ITPro, as well as Facebook and LinkedIn.
Don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro Podcast wherever you find podcasts to never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and a review. We'll be back next week with more analysis from the world of IT. But until then, goodbye.
Bye.
The ITPro Podcast is brought to you by the Dennis Podcast Network.